Good morning, everybody. Happy summer-ish, I guess, if you look outside, although it's supposed to come back and we'll appreciate the sun even more tomorrow, I guess. I want to welcome you to our virtual access event focused on transportation in the era of COVID, our transportation system that serves downtown in our city. We're here today with a great group of experts to help us all understand how that system, the road network, the train network, the bus network has had to adjust over the last several months due to the global pandemic and the economic impacts on our city and on those transit and transportation agencies. We want to understand the current status of the system and also importantly, the outlook as we look toward recovery and reopening and what we can expect as employers, commuters, riders of the system, what's expected of us as we get back on the bus and the train, what can we expect of the transit agencies to keep everybody safe and healthy. I think we're all certainly aware of the importance of our transportation system to serving the downtown economy. Just 25% of commuters to downtown last year drove alone in their car to get to work each morning. Everybody else was getting on a bus, a train, a ferry, a bike, walking, or van pooling or ride sharing. So the state of the transportation system, its capacity, its ability to keep us all healthy and safe is so critical to our reopening and recovery in downtown and of course in other urban areas. We've assembled a panel today and we're going to start from sort of the outside in and work from the region to the county to the city. Don Billen is the Executive Director of Planning and Environment and Project Development at Sound Transit. Don's one of the originals at Sound Transit, has been with the agency since 1996. Don, I don't know what employee number you were, but I think it's one of the, maybe it's not a single digit, but an early double digit employee there at the agency. Chris O'Clair is the Director of the Mobility Division at King County Metro. In that role, she leads fixed route planning for the agency and has also played a really critical role in evolving Metro from what we've thought of as the bus company to a mobility company and agency now. Sam Zimbabwe is the Director of the Seattle Department of Transportation. Sam comes to Seattle from Washington, D.C., where he held a number of senior roles with their Department of Transportation. Sam arrived in Seattle in January of 2019 and was quickly greeted by a 3-week closure of the viaduct, a snowstorm in February, and now has dealt with a global pandemic that has had significant impacts on transportation in our city. Sam, you must feel like a year of being SDOT Director here in Seattle is equivalent to 7 years somewhere else. You've had a full plate, no doubt. And we're also going to hear from Kevin Futhy, who's the Executive Director of Commute Seattle. Commute Seattle is a nonprofit managed by the Downtown Seattle Association through a partnership with our transportation agencies that serves employers and property owners in downtown Seattle with commute plans for their employees. Kevin and his team have recently fielded a survey of 400 decision makers in companies and organizations in downtown and across Seattle on their attitudes and perspectives around returning to work and their transportation needs and those of their employees. Kevin will share some of those findings and also let you know how you can get in touch with Commute Seattle to support your employees and your commuting needs as you look toward reopening and recovery. So with that, I want to turn to you, Don, and to first ask how Sound Transit has had to adjust over the last several months. What does the system look like today, and what's your outlook over the next several months? What can people expect as they return to the train? And before I turn it over to you, Don, I wanted to thank each of you and your teams for what you've been doing over the last several months. We all are aware you can't drive a bus or a train over Zoom, and you can't maintain roads virtually. And you all and your teams have been doing the critical work and keeping our system functioning so that our healthcare workers and other essential workers that can't do their work from their bedroom or their home office or a conference room or a patio can get to where they need to go. So I wanted to start and acknowledge your incredible work as public servants and those of your team and just thank you for it. So with that, Don, I'll just restate my question. Help us understand what's changed over the last several months, how you've had to adjust, what the system looks like today, and what's your outlook over the next several months for Sound Transit service, as well as your capital projects.
All right, well, thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. You know, in many ways, it's the best of times and the worst of times for Sound Transit right now. On the positive front, we've been able to resume construction on multiple light rail lines, and in the next 4 years, we'll more than double the regional light rail system. In fact, by 2024, we'll have as many rail stations as Forward Thrust would have built, which is the you know, the failed 1968 ballot measure for a regional rail system that is often lamented in this region. We're finally going to overcome that legacy, and we'll have as many stations and more track miles as that plan would have built. And thanks to King County Metro, we'll actually have a better bus system than Forward Thrust ever envisioned. So, you know, together, we're really going to have a transit system that we as a region can be proud of. And it's going to be one of the best systems in the country. And with the 2016 ST3 ballot measure, we've got more projects in the work. So if on that front, it's a very exciting time. On the other hand, COVID-19 has deeply impacted all of us in many ways. And as an agency, Sound Transit is no exception. Our board of directors is currently undergoing a process to make adjustments to our expansion program to address the impact of COVID-19 on our revenue. And we've also had to make service adjustments. So let me say a little bit more about both of those realities. On the construction front, we have resumed work under the governor's public health guidelines to ensure worker safety, and we're working very closely with our contractors to ensure adherence to proper safety protocols. We're still scheduled for a September 2021 opening of the Northgate Link project, which will open stations in the University District, Roosevelt, and Northgate neighborhoods. And those will be some of the highest ridership stations in our system, and a very important part of the Metro and Sound Transit rail bus network as well. Additionally, in 2023, we're scheduled to open our East Link project that will connect Seattle, Mercer Island, Bellevue, and Redmond with 10 new stations. And the trip between downtown Seattle and downtown Bellevue will be less than 25 minutes, creating new opportunities for cross-lake connections and partnerships between those two downtowns. And then following up on those two projects in 2024, we'll open extensions to Linwood, Redmond, and Federal Way. So together, these projects and stations will give us a truly regional system with new access and new mobility for downtown Seattle. Longer term, the Sound Transit Board of Directors is responding to the economic recession caused by COVID in a manner that's methodical and informed by the most up-to-date projections, including revenue projections. As such, the board is embarking on a plan of action that makes measured progress on near-term actions, while not overcommitting resources or overcorrecting the program before the ramification of the recessions become clear. And this too will give us the opportunities to explore possible new federal or other funding sources. So specifically, the board's going to take the next year between now and July of 2021 to reschedule and reprogram the expansion program. So that's really looking at the projects beyond the 2024 openings that I discussed. And the board's planning to use some of the same criteria that were used to develop the ST3 ballot measure as a framework for their discussions. And ultimately, their task is to adopt a program that ensures that the projects moving forward best meet the objectives of the voter-approved plans within the reduced revenue stream. While this longer term plan is developing, we're continuing to work on the environmental review for new light rail projects in Seattle. These projects include a second downtown transit tunnel extending from the Chinatown International District north to the Seattle Center, with stations near the library, Westlake, and in South Lake Union. Additionally, light rail will extend to West Seattle and north from the Seattle Center to Ballard. In keeping going with our environmental review, we can move them towards what the Obama administration referred to as a shovel-ready state, which means that they could be eligible for any new funding that becomes available, or should the economy bounce back faster than we currently expect, move forward with local revenues. On the federal front, Sound Transit and other transit agencies across the country continue to call for additional relief beyond what was provided in the CARES Act. You know, in the last recession, Sound Transit was a jobs generator and an engine of recovery, and we want to play that role as well. So to turn, John, more specifically to your question about current service, you know, a couple months ago, our ridership was down by as much as 87% as folks stayed home. We've started to see a slow recovery of ridership. The last report we had, ridership was down around 78%. We also, a few months ago, had to significantly scale back our service, in part due to operator availability. And we've been slowly adding service back. And by September, we'll be at about 82% of our pre-COVID service levels. So the system, you know, is gradually starting to return. And over the next couple months, we're gonna be engaged in a conversation with the public and the board of directors about service plans for the coming year. We're really monitoring ridership closely, monitoring the telework plans of different businesses, including, very importantly, those here in downtown Seattle, to, you know, adjust our service as the economy returns, and to make sure that we try and stay a little bit ahead of that curve. And I'll stop there and see if you had another question that you wanted to pose, or I could offer some
follow-up or two, Don, if I can. What does it look like now to get on a train? If folks haven't been on a train lately, what's expected of riders? What can they expect when they board a train? And then what do the service frequency levels look like today, for instance, maybe in the Westlake station?
Yeah, well, number one, please wear a mask when you get on a train. You know, comply with the governor's order. It's one of the most important things that we can all do. Number two, we have restored fares on the system. So, you know, bring your ORCA card or be prepared to purchase a ticket. You know, with ridership down, generally speaking, there's lots of capacity. There's lots of ability to social distance. There's also enhanced cleaning protocols that are put in place. So you should have a positive experience as you're riding the train. In terms of our frequency of service, right now, we are still operating on a pretty reduced headway. We've got a 20-minute headway during the peak period. In September, we're going to restore that to an 8-minute headway during the peak period. So that's reduced from, you know, where we were a year ago when we were at a 6-minute headway. But we're excited to get back to that 8-minute level, because that's the point at which folks really don't have to look at a schedule.
Great, thanks very much, Don. I want to turn to Chris Auclair now with King County Metro, and same set of questions for you, Chris. I think, as many know, King County Metro is supported largely through the sales tax, and without all of us out there consuming, you've had some significant financial hits to your budget? What are the adjustments that you've had to make to service over the last several months to deal with the financial realities and also sort of meet the market and the demand? What does it look like out on the street today? And then how are you thinking about the next several months?
Thanks, John, and thanks for having us here today. I put together slides that we've been going around the county kind of telling our story just to give some visuals to understand. Our system is complex and it's large, so we thought this would be somewhat helpful. And I just want to start out by what you said, John. It's a real call out to all of our operators, our facilities folks, our vehicle maintenance folks, those that are in the front line every single day, those that are interacting with our customers, and those that are really doing the duties of essential work to make sure that our region is moving. And I just want to do a big call out and thank you to all those Metro employees. And second, to our partners, I think I talk more to SDOT, WashDOT, Sound Transit more than ever. It is complex, not just with COVID, but with the funding. So in moving through these slides, on the next slide, I just wanted to frame this, that it is about COVID, but it's also about what we're facing, the racial inequalities, and that is something that a value that King County Metro is centering on, and I'll talk about that pretty quickly, because as we respond to COVID and as we come out of this crisis, we want to make sure that we are an agency that is centered around our values of equity, safety, and sustainability. And that we want to bring people back to the robust transit system, John, that you were talking about. And that's a partnership with everyone on this phone, including all the employers. Just so everyone's aware, we have some of the best employer partnerships in the country. I go around the country talking about it. Over half of our fare revenue comes from our employer partnerships. And then how we're going to get through the recession. This is a quick map for you to see the disproportionality impact of communities of color due to COVID. And just for everyone to understand, the dark areas down in the South King County are where we're seeing the greatest impact. And those are areas where we're seeing greater racial inequalities throughout the county. So if we go to the next slide, what we're also seeing is, as we have changed our system, is that those that are riding our transit system, those that are needing our transit system, are also in South King County. And that's represented here by the yellow lines. Those are routes where we've seen the lowest ridership loss and where we're seeing true need for the system and true need for essential services. As Don was talking about, our impacts are great. And this slide describes that there's actually been a ridership decrease of about 80%. This is unprecedented. And most of it's actually in the commute time period, where a lot of people that can work from home are working from home, and we're encouraging them to work from home. But those that need our service are needing it in the all day. They're more of the shift workers, the nurses, the doctors, the people that need to get to grocery stores, et cetera. And so how do we keep that service running and running in a post-COVID time period? So how have we responded to COVID-19? This next slide is our response. As Don was talking about, we removed fares, and that was primarily to decrease the interaction between the operator and the customer. Keeping our operators safe is one of our first priorities as we are delivering service. We have not resumed fares. We expect to do so in September. We will have barriers that are put in place for the operators that will open and close so that we can collect fares safely. We're disinfecting our vehicles every day. We were one of the first in the country to actually build a sprayer disinfectant system, and we've been sharing it with our partners around the country. And we've been doing a lot of different things, including requiring masks as the state mandate has come on board, and distributing masks, not just to our employees, but we've been working with community-based organizations to ensure that they get masks. And so we've been out in the community, educating the community about what our service is, where it is, and at the same time providing cloth masks to build that partnership in that relationship. And then, as you can see from the slide on the bottom right-hand side, what the biggest thing that we're challenged with right now is what we have with social distancing. And so right now we're looking at about 6 feet distance. And so for a 40-foot bus, it's only 12 riders. That same 40-foot bus, we need 6 buses to deliver what we used to deliver with 1 bus. And so that complexity is very difficult as we're monitoring our data on a daily basis. If we can move to the next slide, to understand what our response is. And so what we've had to do is, with the drop of ridership, and as Don described, our drop in workforce availability due to vulnerable populations that are sick, we've had to manage those new load capacity limits, and to try to figure out how to be nimble is a challenge for a bus agency, but we are grasping this opportunity. As we look forward to the future, we're not just looking at our fixed route system. We're looking at how to respond and adapt our other services. We use our access paratransit system, and we have become a backup to ambulances. We have a totally COVID responsive base, and we have volunteer drivers that are getting in so that we can move infected people, and we are able to do that in a more cost-effective way than the first responders and ambulances are. We also are delivering food to food banks. Rather than people are unable to get to food banks, we've used our van pool program and our access system to take food from the food banks and deliver it to people. And that is what I'm really proud of at Metro, is not are we adapting for our employees and our fixed route system, but we're also using our new innovative services, the services that you all are buying into with your employee programs, to look at how we can provide that social need to improve the quality of life in King County. So in the next slide, I just want to state that we, just like Town Transit, expect to have our services being ramped up in September. We'll be about 85% of our system, but we are facing a financial crisis. We are looking at how we can use that CARES funding, but it's really just a Band-Aid to the larger problem. We are losing funding through our Seattle Transportation Benefit District at the end of this year, which many of you are aware of. And we are also having to cut a lot of our services due to the loss of our sales tax, which is 60% of our revenue, and our fares, which is about 25 to 30% of our revenue. So the system that we're building and what success will look like is what we're rallying around right now. We have developed a recovery team that is really looking at taking this crisis and making sure that we don't go backwards, and that we look for the future of where we want to go with our values. And we just have the mantra at King County Metro that no crisis should ever go to waste, and that we should be better than when we went into this. And so many of these goals you guys are all aware of, but keeping essential workers at the heart of it, doubling down on our equity standards, and making sure that some of the environmental impacts that we're seeing and that we're hearing about, that we continue to understand those, and to describe to people that transit is the right way to go, and how to bring people back to that system, that robust system, and when to come back. So one of the biggest things that we're going to be setting up is a portal for our employers to begin to message to us when you're bringing your employers back, so we can help you understand how much capacity and what Metro can do for you, and how to make it safe. We do expect to be one of the largest transit agencies in the country as we come out of this, and we do expect to be one of the first choices of where you want to ride, but it's going to take a partnership and us working together. So with that, I just want to let you know our recovery plan is being developed. We hope to have it out in September. And in this will be a lot of operational details, but also messaging information and how to partner and work with everyone. We do expect to come in and out of this wave as we work closely with the governor and King County Public Health and developing this plan. And we say it's a 12 to 18-month plan, but we can take it on for longer. And really, this slide describes as we're trying to set it into phases, and then coming out of it as we're responding to the COVID, responding to the recession, and trying to build back that robust system that we need, because we know that our road system is not where we want to be putting people in our single occupancy vehicles. So thank you. We welcome any feedback either today or as we go through this journey together. We need your feedback to understand how to bring people back to the system in a safe way.
Thanks for that, Chris, and giving us insight in how you've made really difficult decisions over the last couple of months and how you're thinking about the future. And I think you indicated that we'll be able to share out those slides with these. So we will do that. You had a lot of great detail in there. I want to turn now to Sam Zimbabwe, the Director of Seattle Department of Transportation. Similar set of questions to you, Sam, but I also want to touch on a couple of specific topics, notably the West Seattle Bridge, the city's busiest street, and also, as Chris referenced, the city's Transportation Benefit District is up for renewal, and the mayor has transmitted that to the council. Could you tell us what that would do, what's in it, why is it important from your perspective?
Sure, and thanks for having me. It's great to be able to communicate in this way. I was at one of the City Maker breakfasts last year. I like that venue a lot more, and hopefully we can get back to that. I also, I didn't put together slides, and I'm glad I didn't, because they would have been put to shame by what Chris just walked through. And I couldn't have said any of that any clearer than she did. And I'll just echo that I think the framing of the three-part challenges that we're facing of COVID-19, the racial justice and inequities in our system, and the recession that is going to impact us going forward, are the same challenges that we're also facing at SDOT. And I think it shows the level of partnership among these agencies, that we sort of talk in the same language as we go and tell the story around the region. So I think a lot of our numbers at SDOT mirror those of what both Don and Chris have talked about. At the height of the stay home, stay healthy order, we were seeing vehicle reductions coming into downtown. We were down at about 30% of normal levels, and that's not just single occupancy, not just personal vehicles, but that's every truck and bus coming into downtown. So it was a precipitous drop in vehicle demand in particular, in addition to the transit demand that Chris and Don talked about. But that was also uneven across the city. On a lot of our neighborhood arterials, we were seeing about more like a 50% reduction in traffic, but also a 10% increase in speeds on our neighborhood arterials. And that led to some pretty significant or not a parallel decrease in the number of crashes we were seeing and the number of serious injuries and fatalities. That's ticked down a little bit now over the last few months, but it's been one of the interesting disparate impacts of the pandemic. I also think, when you talked about, John, at the beginning, that 25% SOV mode share coming into and out of downtown, I think it's really important to remember that that is also people are very multimodal in Seattle. We've evolved a multimodal culture, and the work that Commute Seattle did last year surveying employers showed that a lot of people, I think it was about 40% of people, took multiple modes within a week. And we really need to make sure that the system is resilient to be able to bring people back to downtown and to make sure that we're keeping people downtown. So, we've been we think there's going to be a whole bunch of partnership needed around how we get people downtown, how we get people around their neighborhoods, and some of the travel patterns that they're trying to take as we're, even when people are still traveling a little bit less. There's a lot of continuing the same basic playbook that we've had over the last few years, but with some important changes and additions. We really still think that multimodal choice is going to be critically important. That's why we've maintained our investments in improved biking and walking, transit, travel time and reliability investments, and some of the major capital investments that the city's also making in transit, transit capital upgrades. It's also why the Seattle Transportation Benefit District is going to continue to be important as a way to both purchase service through King County Metro, but also continue to make those sort of basic infrastructure upgrades and improve the experience. It's also why our continued investment in travel demand management is critical for the city, and really in partnership among all of us and all of the DSA folks on the call this morning as well.
And Sam, just so if folks aren't clear, the Seattle Transportation Benefit District's a tax measure that we've all been paying for the last several years and is up for renewal and may be on the November ballot if the council chooses to put it there.
That's right. So it was 2014 was Prop 1. It was 0.1% sales tax and $60 vehicle license fee. That's been critical to the success, and we put out annual reports about what we've been able to do with that voter-approved resource. We went from 25% of Seattle households within a 10-minute walk of 10-minute frequency transit service to about 70% as of last year. The passage of I-976 restricts our abilities to use some of those funding sources, and the vehicle license fee in particular. So what we've proposed is a 0.1% tax measure, the same 6-year timeline, because we think that's the best way to get sort of the right timeline to enable us as a region to see what recovery looks like, and also what continued investment and possible re-expansion of that voter approved measure whether in the city or at the county level, or sort of what that transit future holds. It seems like there's going to be this period of time, as Chris talked about, that's still uncertain of what recovery really looks like. And so we think that that 0.1% sales tax, maintaining that is critical to our ability to at least maintain that core transit service network, and then continue the other work that we've done through the Seattle Transportation Benefit District. So council's having a second hearing on that today. We anticipate that that will be on the November ballot in some form, which is really, we think, is going to still be very important for us as a city and as a region, and part of that recovery. The other thing we're facing is this infrastructure crisis of the West Seattle Bridge and the rapid degradation of the conditions there that caused us to close the bridge at the end of March. Yesterday, actually, the mayor made a proclamation of civil emergency on the bridge. In our research, it's the first of its kind about a piece of infrastructure rather than about sort of a set of events or environmental conditions or what have you. So I think that reflects the critical nature of that of the bridge and what the impacts we're already seeing from the closure. And even though travel is down across the city, we've still seen rapidly shifting transportation patterns and impacts on communities on both sides of the Duwamish Valley that really need to be addressed now. And we've done over 80 individual mitigations, but we've also put out a set of through our Reconnect West Seattle effort, a way for people to see what we're planning to do over the course of, as quickly as we can, but over the course of the next year or so in mitigating the closure there. So there's a lot of work that will continue to have to be done. It's also going to be a place where there's going to need to be collaboration and coordination. As Chris said, you know, as people bring employees back to job sites, it's going to be important for us to have that continued coordination and dialogue so that we know how we can help best mitigate. And some of that's going to be transit service through King County Metro and others. Some of that's the type of bike improvements that we can make. Some of it's creativity and how we think about TDM and continued telework over time, even though we know that there's a real need for people to get back to some of their old patterns. I'm working from the dining room table today. I know that some people enjoy their home offices. Some people are getting a little bit stir crazy sometimes. I do also just want to talk about a little bit of the recession sort of impacts. The city budget office has been very clear and continue to talk about what it means at the city level, the impacts on the city of $200 million annually. That has, SDOT has not been spared from that. And we're looking at sort of $40 to $45 million impacts annually over the course of the next few years. We've been able to, throughout the pandemic, keep our capital projects going. We took a 2-day safety stand down on our contracted capital work. We've really been able to work with the contracting community creatively to make sure we're updating our health and safety plans, keeping workers safe, and it's credit to the contracting community in the city, SDOT staff, a whole range of people that we've been able to keep our big projects moving. But that budget impact will start to affect us. It's sort of a tragic time for that to happen too, because we're getting great pricing when we put projects out for bid. We're actually getting pricing that's sort of a shame to not be able to put things out, but we have had to take the approach of delaying discrete projects, similar to what Sound Transit's talking about, in order to see what is going to come from the federal government. And we really think that there's an important role, similar to there was in the last recession, for the federal government investing in getting our infrastructure started and keeping projects moving and not missing this opportunity to keep people employed and keep things going. So we have a strong hope for federal support coming. It's really critical to enabling us to continue the investment that the city's already been making. SDOT gets our funding from many sources, some of which are pretty stable. Our levy to move Seattle, we're only seeing small impacts in property tax revenues, for example. Some of them are very volatile. Our commercial parking tax, sales tax, a whole bunch of things are really seeing volatile impacts, and it's hard to know exactly when those revenue sources will come back. So when we talk about the levy to move Seattle and this overall program of capital investment, 9 years, leverages that property tax, which is pretty stable, with a whole bunch of other sources which are more unstable. And so we'll need to do a big effort within SDOT and engaging with the public about what the financial uncertainty means about our ability to deliver that overall program going forward. So I'll pause there. I know I've been talking for a little bit, and there's some questions starting to come in. And I think we want to get into some more dialogue as well.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up on the West Seattle Bridge, Sam. What does the declaration of civil emergency allow the city, the mayor, to do that they otherwise couldn't do?
So that's a good question. So there's a few things, and some of it I think will, as the conditions evolve and as we work to get traffic back connected, things will change, and we're still in this position of not knowing whether we're in a repair or replacement mode quite yet, and we're keeping all the options moving forward in parallel. The proclamation helps signal the need for federal and state resources, and it doesn't sort of print money in and of itself, but it opens us up for some ability at both the federal and state level for the potential for some funding. It also, if we start to hit some roadblocks on various pathways that we might end up on in terms of contracts or permits or things like that, it can help streamline that process just a little bit with an emergency. It also signals to everybody, I think, to the public, all stakeholders, that we're all clear that this is an emergency, and there's other critical infrastructure. As I mentioned, the mitigation of travel in communities on both sides of the Duwamish, as well as maintaining the low bridge, the Spokane Street swing bridge, where we've got, it's in okay shape, but it's not in perfect shape. And so there may be some needs to continue to invest in the low bridge as well. So for both those traffic mitigations and for our other critical infrastructure in the area, the emergency proclamation sort of puts us all on the same footing and page about all of the critical needs that we have related to the West Seattle Bridge program as a whole.
Great, thank you for that. And we're going to open it up for questions, but before I do that, I want to turn to Kevin Futhy, who again is the Executive Director of Commute Seattle. Commute Seattle has recently fielded a survey of major decision makers and companies and organizations around Seattle on their plans for returning to work. And he's going to walk us through some of those findings and also talk about how, if you are not connected to Commute Seattle as an employer within downtown or the city and are looking for support and how to think through how you support your telework needs and returning folks to physical locations and offices. Commute Seattle's here to help, and he will tell you how to get engaged with them if you're not already.
Thanks, John, and good morning to everybody. And for those of you who don't know, Commute Seattle is a nonprofit partner of the DSA and the agencies that are represented here on the panel today. And for the last 15 years, with funding from those agencies, we've been able to work with the business community in downtown, many of you on this call perhaps, and across the city in working to more efficiently get folks to and from work. And as we've grown as a city and as we've grown as a downtown, that's really been critical, because we could have grown in such a way that the traffic would have choked that growth. Instead, Commute Seattle's really been a success story over the last 15 years, growing transit, growing active commuting, increasing telework even before COVID-19 hit. But now that we are in this COVID era, and we've taken a survey out to better understand the future of commuting and what businesses are anticipating over the next year, we do see, obviously, there's going to be a big shift in the routines that people use as they travel, especially to and from work. We've already seen that in the drastic increase in teleworking, and as Don and others said earlier, a precipitous drop in transit ridership. And that will eventually start to grow back. But in the meantime, the telework and the active commuting are going to play a huge role in getting people back to the office. So the survey that we fielded, we asked folks, before COVID-19, what was your telework or remote work culture? And what do you anticipate it will be after COVID? So the blue lines here on this chart represent pre-COVID and the orange afterwards. And you can see that many companies never teleworked, or their culture was that you would come to the office every day, or maybe if you did telework, it was once a month or maybe just a couple of times a month. That was the norm for many companies pre-COVID. After COVID, we're seeing many companies are saying, actually, we're going to be teleworking a few times a week or once a week. But there's also a substantial share, 23%, that are unsure of what their telework culture is going to look like. Similarly, we also ask companies what kind of policies do you have in place to support remote working and telework. And many companies do not yet have written policies in place to help define the procedures for maintaining telework beyond the COVID period. So right now we're teleworking because we have to, but how does that switch over the long term to teleworking really as a feature of the workplace over the long term? Next slide, please. So again, Commute Seattle is here as a free resource to partner with employers. It's what we've been doing over the last 15 years, whether it comes to your telework policies, your commuter benefits, ORCA cards, your pre-tax commuter benefits, your incentives for active commuting, for carpooling, for starting van pools. It's going to be a all of the above process, I think, to get folks back to the office in a efficient way. It's worth mentioning, I think, that in downtown Seattle pre-COVID, there were 330,000 jobs roughly. There are not that many parking spots in downtown Seattle, not even close. And so not everyone can drive back to work in a car alone. Transit, like I said, will be a big component of that. And even today, despite the reductions, King County Metro is serving about 100,000 trips every day right now. This is a critical service for many workers even today, and will continue to be so as we ramp back up the commute. But teleworking obviously going to be a key part of the mix. It was already the fastest growing mode choice pre-COVID, and we expect a huge and permanent increase in telework. And it might not be every day of the week for many employees. It might be several times a week as employers look to reduce the number of folks on site on any one day, but still cycle everybody throughout the week. And active commuting, biking. The bike shops in Seattle have been reporting record sales in many cases as people recreationally bike for the first time, and converting as many of those recreational bikers as we can to commute bikers will be a big way to keep people moving safely around the city. Commute Seattle works with companies on implementing bike plans as well. So we invite you to engage with us. Our services, again, are provided free of charge because of the funding that we have provided by DSA and by the agencies that are represented here on the call. You can connect with us via email or through our website. And I do want to call out that we are providing specialized consultations around the West Seattle Bridge dilemma as well. And as companies ramp back up and expect folks to be commuting to or from West Seattle, that does present some special challenges. And so we do have support specifically for you if you've got concerns about that. We invite you to connect with us. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kevin, and thanks to the agencies and partners here for their investment in Commute Seattle's work so that we can support employers and property owners in working through these difficult challenges on a good day of how we get people in and out of downtown, and now in a pandemic when the complexities are that much greater. I want to pull a couple of the questions out of the Q&A box as we get started here for our Q&A portion, and also invite you to raise your virtual hand if you want to ask a live question, and Emily can unmute you. Don, coming to you with just a very specific question around the availability of Sound Transit's real-time arrival info on apps and stations. I don't know if you're able to answer that question of why that hasn't been available.
Yeah, the short answer is our current signaling system is a little bit limited in what it can do with real-time arrival information, and with the schedule changes that we've had, we haven't been able to adapt both in our stations and with our vendors. The good news is that we've got a new passenger information system on the way, and the goal is to deliver that with the opening of Northgate in September of 2021. And so you'll see a lot better information coming for passengers.
Great, and a question from Terry Lundeen with Coughlin Porter Lundeen is one I also wanted to get to, and that is, what can we learn from other metro areas around the country and around the world with robust transit systems, and how they're thinking about operating, how they're currently operating? Are there some best practices or lessons learned from places that have safely reopened their cities and their transit system ahead of ours? And a question for anybody on the panel that wants to take it.
John, I'll kick this one off and pass to our partners. So first off, yes, and I actually personally spend a lot of time, I'm on a recovery board with American Public Transportation Association, where I'm working closely to get information from around the country. And I think the first thing that we're hearing is that, number one, as Don says, people need to wear masks. And trying to understand what the proper social distancing is, because public transportation does need us to load the system a little bit more effectively. What we know now is that the pandemic is not, the virus is not spreading on surfaces as much as it is through the air. So trying to figure out air filtration systems, trying to understand how we can move the flow of air is going to be a priority, I think, as we're looking at the future. But also just limiting the context. So what is that? What is that a proper social distancing? Europe is a little bit ahead of us in this one. I will say we have an international bus benchmarking group that we're also part of, and we are pulling a lot of those safety procedures directly from them. I like to say that we're stealing it, but it's just really sharing information. And then finally, the huge messaging. We have many companies that are kind of coming together to say, how do we build trust back in public transportation? And what are we hearing from our customers that they need? And the number one we're hearing is that customers want control of their environment. And so building that messaging, but following through with the safety procedures is really where we're focusing our time. So yes, a lot to learn. And I have a whole team that's spending a lot of time thinking and working across the country and across the world on that.
Anybody else want to jump in on that question? And also Terry's, I think, specific element of his question was, do we believe or know that most transit agencies are going to operate at a reduced capacity to keep people spread out, or are there some that have brought loads to buses and trains back to regular levels and done so safely?
I mean, I think it's probably a question for Chris mostly, but I also think, I mean, this is my own, this is Sam speaking, not necessarily SDOT, but like, I think that some of the public demand for transit capacity and bringing people back to work is going to be coincidental with when other parts of society start to function again, like people going back to school and people being able to do their normal work. And I think that those things will all happen in parallel with when it is also safer to bring more people back onto buses. And so I don't think we'll get into, one will likely be, it'll be hard to do one without the other. And the time of when we can, and those places like Asian cities and European cities that have much, much lower transmission rates than we've seen throughout our response to the pandemic, transit hasn't seemed to be a vector of disease spread. So once you get it down to that manageable level where you can contact trace and do all those things from a pandemic management point of view, transit's not the barrier to getting people back to their normal lives.
And Sam, just to build on that, I had a slide, I just took it out. We are actually in lockstep with the governor's phases. So as you're describing, as we move into phase 3 or 2.5, we hope to get down to 3 feet. Many Europeans are 1 meter, actually Portland, Oregon is down to 3 feet. So as the pandemic is changing and as we're looking at transmission and the number of infected, we will be bringing that down. So it's really about where we are locally in the infection rate and kind of adjusting. And that's going to be really explicitly wrote out in our recovery plan that we're going to be able to publish so everyone can see and understand that.
Great, thank you. And your comments around sort of matching service to the return of employees and the demand is a good segue into the next question from Chuck Nelson, the CEO of the Washington Athletic Club. And before I get to his question, just have to credit Chuck for his incredible leadership of that institution. You know, I look at the requirements just to get our office staff back in the office, and Chuck's got childcare, a pool, locker rooms, events, a bar, a restaurant. I'm sure I'm forgetting about a dozen other uses in the WAC, and credit to him and his team for what they've reopened to date, what they kept going safely throughout this, and the steps they take to preserve that institution and serve their members. So Chuck's specific question was for you, Chris, around the portal that you mentioned to gauge information from employers on their intent to bring employees back. Is that something you're able to make public to interested members of the DSA or others in the community? We certainly are getting a lot of questions from those restaurants and retailers and others that have reopened that are dying for the office workers to come back. We're trying to get that information as well from some of the major employers. Are you able to make some of the findings or all of the findings from that portal available?
Yes, so thank you. What we're looking at is a portal that we're going to be able to pull information, particularly those who have an Orca business account with us, working with Commute Seattle and the others around the region, so that we can gain information on a real-time basis, and that we can be pushed information from the employers, and then what we, or pull information from the employers, and then we hope to push information back out. This portal's in development. There's a few other trans agencies around the country that have started this, and right now our pushing is more via an email, but we're looking at other ways in which we can build kind of a SharePoint site that information can be real time and provided, so employers can see where we're at and what we're understanding. So yes, stay tuned. And Kevin, your team will be part of this as we're developing it. It's in the development. We hope to have it launched in the next month or so. But as it stands now, I do recommend what Kevin said is stay connected through the DSA. We're working closely with Challenge Seattle, with the governor and Mamie, to also get information out through that way. So that coordination is what the purpose of this portal is going to be. And that information is also part of what we'll work with SDOT and Sound Transit. So just because it's Metro, it is an ORCA system that we're looking at. So just so you know that is something that we're going to be working in tandem and delivering with our partners.
I think everybody's dying to see it and know what the plans are of major employers and those large and small. So thanks for that, Chris, and we look forward to being able to share that out. Howard Cohen with Clyce Properties and Clyce Hotels noted your comment, Chris, about Metro's delivery of food who can't make it to food banks, and has a question around how Metro's getting the recipients' names and email addresses, or is there some place folks can go to register who aren't able to make it to food banks? How are you connecting with those folks and serving them?
Well, first off, we first heard about this as part of our Access Paratransit program. We have direct connections with social service agencies, community-based organizations, and they were calling for that. And so we were working with our direct passengers. Right now, we're trying to figure out if we can get CARES funding to help us support this service. We are spending a lot of money on a monthly basis doing this. We are doing it through our HopeLink access system, and HopeLink is one of the largest partners in providing this system. We're also working with Solid Ground. Those are two agencies that I would reach out to directly, as we are depending on the food banks and really coordinating that. We don't want to be the portal for requests. We're looking at the food banks to be that portal and then working directly with them to provide those services. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. It's Christina Auclair at kingcounty.gov, and I'd love to connect you with the right people.
Great, and a question from Don Nielsen around, and Don and I spent some time together last week, so if he'll maybe allow me to paraphrase, because we had a long conversation around some of these topics, but his question, I think, is around some of the real challenges that we see on our streets and behavioral health and issues and folks dealing with substance use disorder, and how have those presented themselves on your systems, on the bus, on the train, at stations, and how are you communicating those challenges within your governments, to the city, to the council, to others?
Well, I can start very briefly. I mean, we had challenges when we were in a free fare mode, particularly on the light rail system, and that, in part was what spurred us to go back to paid fares. But, all of those challenges also have to be thought of in the, in the larger context that both Sam and Chris addressed in terms of the economic impacts, the racial inequities, and the other challenges that our society faces. So, the transportation system is really just experiencing the broader societal challenges.
Just to build on that, what Don is saying, I mean, I think what we all know is that the most vulnerable populations are being hit most through COVID and the economic recession. And it is our responsibility in the public sector to address the whole system and the whole community. And as Don is describing, and they were free fare and we are free fare right now, we have noticed an uptick of what we call non-destinational riders, as transit can be a safe place for people to ride and can be a place where people seek shelter. And there was a huge uptake through the spring. We've noticed as the weather is improving that it isn't as much. We do expect through the fall that it could come back depending on what we do with fares, but even with fares, we ask once, we ask twice, and then we allow people to board. So it is not the responsibility of the operator to require fares. We've done a couple things. First off, we've transitioned our fare enforcement to move away from enforcement, really to look at how we're managing the system in the bus and the safety of the buses as they're not collecting and checking fares. And we're looking at those being ambassadors, providing information and connecting with the Department of Community and Health Services at King County and giving them resources to social service agencies. I know that that's difficult. We've been trying to work with them as they're opening up new shelters and places to get and really sweep the buses. It is a challenge. It's something we're continuing to struggle with, but also to balance that value of kind of how we support the whole community. The last thing I want to say is that our operators, once again, are feeling a lot of this and making sure that their safety is at the utmost importance with our customers and making sure that they know how to and when to call for help and that they are getting responsive help when needed.
So thanks for that, Chris. And we knew we had a lot to cover today, and there's a number of questions we didn't get to in the Q&A box, but we will do our best to follow up on those with each of you if you're so kind to help us provide those answers back to attendees along with the slides that were presented today. But I want to thank Chris, Sam, Don, and Kevin for joining us today, and more importantly for your work over the last several months to keep us moving, particularly our essential workers, and your role going forward to support recovery downtown and across our county and region. Next week, exclusive for DSA members, is a roundtable that I'll be hosting with some peers across the country who lead downtown organizations in Austin, San Francisco, and also in Vancouver, BC. So across North America, I should say, on a conversation around some of the challenges that they're facing in their downtowns and how they're looking toward the future. You should have gotten an invite to that yesterday, so check your inbox and we'll have one more out to you early next week. But thank you for joining us for this virtual access event. I wish you a safe and healthy weekend. Let's all wear our masks and do our part to keep this curve flat. Thanks, everybody. Take care.